How do you find right now the situation of Israel when you compare it to Israel before October 7th and right now?
Paradoxical. I find it that it's lots more complicated, lot more difficult than perhaps at any time of its history. When Israel has had wars that it has considered to be victorious, triumphant, like the Six-Day War, that was 6 days. This has been going for a year. And in the beginning, the idea, if I understood it right, and I think most people thought that the stated objective was to, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, eliminate Hamas and release the hostages. Neither has happened. We have seen instead a massive number of civilian victims, something we've never seen before. Never. And to my astonishment, when I looked at all of these crises that had happened in the Middle East, where Israel has played a part, from its Independence Day war and from the Palestinian perspective, the Nakba, to the present, and you add all the casualties, wounded and killed, the number of people that have been wounded and killed in this war is far higher. This one war for 1 year. If this continues the way it has prevailed, it will undermine Israel's economic futures. It has already undermined the very existence of too many Palestinians. And as much as I try to relate to the objectives that Israel has, sometimes they have been valid. In this case, I don't think that they are at all, and may not have been so for a very long time. We know for sure that 70% of the victims tend to be women and children. What kind of assets are they in this war? How will their demise enable Israel to have more security? I simply don't see this. So I find that this is paradoxical because it leaves Israel in a very vulnerable position. Yet within Israel, I think that there's this feeling of, particularly the past few weeks, as some of the leaders of Hamas have been killed, almost a sense of triumph, a sense of victory or a coming victory. And I'm afraid that this kind of situation emerges almost like a parallel reality when most of the world, the international community sees things in a certain way. Within Israel, things are seen in another way. And I think that one of the key reasons to this is, and I try to argue that in the book, is the role of the United States as a big or great enabler, if you will. So the long and short, to recap, I think what we've seen for a year now is a war in Gaza. I'm not sure it's a war against Hamas. I think it's a war in Gaza. We've seen it now extend from Gaza to southern Lebanon and even to Iran and to Yemen and to West Bank in a certain ways, in a certain sense. And this momentum shifting to other areas, I think it's a very ominous sign. It reflects something that may yet to come. And I'm not very optimistic about that direction. I think it's deliberate conflict escalation on the part of the Netanyahu cabinet. And there the question then becomes, why can this happen? And I think that there are two major reasons for it. One, that the Biden administration doesn't seem to be willing, is able but not willing to subdue this kind of devastation. And then the somewhat surprising impotence of the international community to intervene and to contain these atrocities. And that leads to a situation where the potential for regional escalation is steadily rising. So it's no longer a question, will it happen, but where, when, and how. And this can be militarily very successful as a tactic, but no tactic creates peace. That comes with strategy. And tactic is based basically on abuse with principles of humanity, if you will, in this particular case, whereas strategy would have to be based on trust and dialogue. Dialogue works. And if this is missing, I don't see the end to this. Of course, there will be an end to it, but it will be something very dark. I think that your question presumes that there is more to it, and I tend to agree. Many people, particularly military observers, have been concerned about the idea of multi-front war. Could Israel handle it? And I see a situation where obviously it started from Gaza and it has been expanding. And we could talk about the milestones, some of which I outlined in the book. But I think that what is also happening is something very intriguing. If we would have parallel conflicts, and to the degree we have things going on in Israel proper, we have things going on in Gaza Strip, West Bank, southern Lebanon, up to Litani River at least, and beyond, even to Beirut. We see things happening in Jordan, Syria, Yemen, and so on and so forth. And we wonder what will happen in the case of Iran. There seems to be some sort of a tacit blueprint to this. But the way it happens is in a sequence. It started from Gaza, and then it's spreading when the momentum is moving away from Gaza. Not all the activities, but the momentum. We see this from the fact that the northern Gaza is now under heavy bombardment. And I don't think that these are military assets alone. I think that from the beginning of the war, there has been an effort to create an area of cushion, if you will. And that goes to cut the area of Gaza even smaller and smaller. It's cut by 1,000 cuts. Now, if you can handle this and then move to the next theater of war, as the military observers call it, in a sequence, it's easier than waging these wars in parallel. But it hasn't happened in sequence, and it hasn't happened exactly in parallel. It's been a dirty war in that sense as well. Netanyahu cabinet, of course, has said from the beginning that Israel has a right to defend itself. It has a responsibility to defend itself. That's absolutely true. Both the right and the responsibility. But that doesn't seem to be the question, really, because then the question becomes, what about the Palestinians? Do they have a right and responsibility to defend themselves? And I think that they do. What about the Lebanese? What about the Yemen? What about Iranians? And so on and so forth. This is a very strange situation where it's hard for me to see that any other country could do achieve the same objectives that Israel has so far done without international sanctions, without international intervention. And that takes us back to the role of the great powers, the role of the United States and a few other countries. There seems to be a tacit subtext to this. If you defend yourself against Israel, we see that the hostile action, and we will punish you. And that doesn't seem to be something that a credible broker would do in this kind of a situation. So I don't see this as an asset to US objectives in the Middle East. It may be that in the short term, from purely military point of view, but that point of view has never created peace. And that's why I think we are where we are. At least I argue in the book that what we see right now is the result of 50 years of failed military diplomacy in the region, mainly by the US because it has such a major influence in the area. But the problems themselves go back to the ethnic expulsions from late 1940s to the present.